All right, are we ready? I'm looking, so still missing a couple people, but all right. This meeting is Nuwari, Needham Unites Against Racism Initiative, and we have a few more people arriving. But I do just want to say that this is an open meeting of the Nuwari Working Group. It's being conducted remotely, consistent with the governor's executive order from March 12th regarding the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19. We have been advised and directed to suspend public gatherings, and as such, we're having meetings in a publicly accessible location, all right, with remote participation. This public order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law, and this meeting will not feature public comment. We do, however, welcome public comments, and the public can comment at any time by sending an email to Nuwari, N-U-A-R-I, at needhamma.gov. So certainly that is always welcome. This meeting is being recorded, and we just always advise everybody that that's the case. So whatever is going on behind you goes on behind you. We are missing a couple people that I know of this evening. We're missing both Matt and Olu, who had other commitments this evening. So that's a bummer. We will miss their participation as we are talking about visioning. So I want to just start by thanking Ramin and the Needham Diversity Initiative for the work that they did to create the summit that occurred over the weekend. They had some 300 people who joined together to listen, learn, and discuss issues of race and race amity in Needham. And thank you for an interesting and provocative summit, and lots for people to think about and participate in. So it was a great afternoon yesterday. Thank you. With that, Lisa has joined us today. So I do want to introduce Lisa to everybody. She, as we said last week, and we sent out her resume for everyone, but she joins us as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant to help lead us through this work in creating the vision for this group to guide our work. I want to thank everybody who took the time over the last week to do her set of questions. I found they took longer than 20 minutes for me to really think about what I wanted to say to them. But so I appreciate the time that all of you invested in thinking about what pieces you wanted to give her to work with. And I look forward to her working her magic, as I said to her earlier today, with all of us to help us get to this vision to guide our work. So with that, if I could turn it over to Lisa to help us move on for tonight, I'm ready to go. And I hope everybody else is.
Well, greetings, everyone.
Greetings.
I have been watching you via video, trying to get to know you because I know we don't have a lot of time to do introductions and schmoozing and norming. We just got a storm. And so I'm looking forward to doing the work with you. You are an impressive group, both individually and collectively. And I have felt your passion for this work through your comments that I've observed. And also for those of you who completed the survey, thanks for that. And again, it was to give us a little head start, given that we are working under time constraints. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so I had this fear that I wouldn't be able to see the Zoom in full screen mode, which is really silly. I've been on so many Zoom calls, I don't know why I thought it wouldn't work, but you know who you are and you know why we're here. So this is our ambitious agenda for tonight. You know, starting out with expectations and agreements, a little bit about a vision statement. We'll talk a little bit about the survey. We'll do some brainstorming. I'll show you some vision statements. we'll do a group exercise, and then voila, we'll have a vision. No, it's not going to happen that way. We will have pieces of a potential vision, and then we'll talk about next steps of action for us. So I want to say a little bit about expectations before I get to agreements. I think that we have a daunting task, but because of the group that is assembled, I think that I know that we will be successful. I am not a Zoom guru or a PowerPoint princess, so you will get basic PowerPoints, but what is really important is the conversation among us, and I'm really looking forward to that. I don't know if you all came up with working group agreements, but these are just some basic agreements that are typically established before a group starts to talk about some of the issues that some people may feel are sensitive. So they're right there for you to see. And I'm asking if there is anything else that anyone would like to add that would make them feel brave in this space or that they require in order to participate fully.
I think this looks like a great list, and we did not talk about these ahead of time, but I would move that we adopt them. And if anybody does think of some other things that they'd like to add, by all means, let us know as we go on. But it's a great place to start.
Okay, great. So when you think about a vision statement, some of you talked about in your surveys how important it was. And some of you indicated that you're not sure exactly how it would serve us, but most of you were on the same page in terms of a guide or groundwork, a foundation, somewhere to launch from, et cetera. And I just want to share with you some other comments about a vision statement and their purpose. And so I'm always in this dilemma about whether or not to read a slide, but in the interest of equity, I typically paraphrase some of the key points so that anyone who requires that is able to know what's on the slide. So values, aspirational, shared. It has a time frame. It covers all aspects of the community. It's long-term, enduring, should be based in reality, be meaningful, describe an outcome. It should be believable and relevant. It should provide inspiration, purpose, and direction. One second, please. Okay. It won't forward. Technical glitch. Okay, here we go. So it's where the community wants to be in the future. It states the current and future objectives of an organization or community. It's intended to guide decisions and align with the philosophy and set of goals. It doesn't have a particular length, and ideally, it's a shared vision. And then this last one, I think, is important to highlight because while we may see vision statements, there were very few that I saw in my research that were around racial equity and towns. So should be heavily informed by communities of color impacted by institutional and structural racism, those with the real expertise or lived experience as we know it. Comments or questions on those? Disagree? Anything missing? Okay.
Lisa,
And
can I ask you one question?
yes.
Are we working on a vision statement for the Nuari or for the town?
For the town. So the charge is to articulating a recommended vision for racial equity in Needham and guiding principles that will inform future actions. Any other questions before I go on? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the survey. And as I indicated, many of you were spot on with regard to why we needed a vision statement. And I'm just sharing a few of the responses that I got. And for those of you who did not have the opportunity to complete the survey, I welcome you to share now why a vision statement.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the difference between a mission statement and a vision statement?
Great question. So a vision statement is where you want to be. So ideally, aspirational, inspirational. A mission is why you exist. Strategy is your game plan. Your values are what you stand for. So that actually leads me to another question. What would you identify as the values of Needham? And you can make the distinction between little t and big T if you like.
Education, family, organization and orderly living conditions. So far, if I were to guess, that's what I would come up with.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts?
I would add community.
Okay. So I asked that question because when we're thinking about aligning the vision with the values, we first have to know what the values are, right? And it sounds like from Ramin's response that also is in alignment with the priorities that were identified in the survey. Okay. Next survey question that I want to highlight, and I'm not highlighting them all, don't worry. So what should be explicitly stated? I was curious to know what folks were hoping you'd see in there, not the exact words, but in order for us to start a conversation around concepts and themes, I thought that that would be a good starter. So as you see, it's a racial equity vision statement. So obviously that language would need to be in there, but there are strong words like embrace, commitment, together, diverse. Now, when we actually move into the visioning, we'll use stronger words, action words, verbs, etc. Comments on this sample of responses? Sample responses. Anyone want to add that maybe didn't have the opportunity on the survey? Okay. You guys are awfully pensive. I'm going to need you to talk up real soon, but I'll keep going. So this was, what would racial equity look like in Needham? Keywords here: policies, procedures, practices, norms. Housing opportunities, employment, educational opportunities, accepted, welcomed, able to succeed, removal of barriers and hurdles. Any additions? What would racial equity look like in Needham?
In addition to any additions, I would ask folks on the call, what here particularly speaks to people as well? What do you think are some of the more important things here? And maybe you can tell me, Lisa, if I'm interrupting unfairly, but in all of these, I'm sort of curious about where people land.
Sure. What resonates?
I think feeling accepted and welcomed. I think that resonates, and that's something that I know that we need to work on as a whole in the town. And then also something I see about removing barriers and hurdles, and I think a lot of that's going to base on what we are either reconstructing or deconstructing, and kind of starting over in some senses, and the way that we build certain policies and procedures that are in place.
Marcus, your mic is going in and out.
Oh, you can't hear me?
In and out.
Okay. Can you not hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Sorry. So what I said, the last thing I said is about removal of barriers and hurdles. I think what that's going to take is kind of dismantling what we have in place and kind of going from the ground up and figuring out a way to do that with, I think one of the things you said earlier is making sure that, people of color are in that room where it's happening and they're with our lived experiences. And I think that's going to be really important to construct policies and procedures that are in place that will be equitable for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Other thoughts?
I agree that it's about inclusivity and feeling a sense of belonging. But it's also, I mean, I think we have to make sure that everybody understands the biases that exist. I think that there needs to be a piece of education in order to start dismantling some of these things, some of these systems. So I think it's awareness of what biases are and how they are preventing us from kind of changing the structural systems. So until that's understood, then I think it's, unless that's understood, we can't have racial equity.
And the word understand is underscoring a number of points that you all have made. So when we think about what some of the aspiration might be, we probably want to articulate something around understanding, increased understanding, or maybe something even more active.
Lisa, this is Sue Neckes. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I'm looking at some really great phrasing here and various ideas that all kind of work together. But I'm wondering if something like bullet point 2, where we say racial equity in Needham and anywhere means that experiences in Needham are similar for the minority as well as the majority, is more of that, like where you want to get to, kind of more aspirational, and the idea of removing barriers and hurdles is more how we get there. So I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped around what is going into like a vision statement versus some of the other pieces that you would think about.
Right. So the vision statement, and we'll get into more detail, is about where you want to be. The strategy and the objectives and the tactics are how you get there. And the way that you get there is your guiding principles. So we have to think simultaneously about all of those concepts so that we don't put all of the weight on the vision statement, even though it is sort of the beacon light. But the steps to that, or steps for that, follow by way of goals, objectives, tactics, and strategies.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the last bullet can easily be changed into a mission by saying it entails entails removal, by saying absence of barriers and hurdles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an endpoint rather than a path.
Yes. And then I asked you to do some imagery, envisioning a new Needham. And this is one of the descriptions. And I think it's worth reading. This is a town where the color of your skin does not indicate your experience shopping at CVS. This is a town where you see people who look like you in leadership roles in government, in business, in the schools, and civic groups. This is a town where if something happens to you, you feel safe and validated in reporting it through a clear process that values accountability. This is a town where students, young and old, have opportunities to learn a more full version of American history and its relevance to today's challenges. This is a town where the color of your skin does not lead others to make assumptions about you. That creates opportunities for community to confront unpleasant truths and seek to find solutions that amplify values of equity, even if there is pushback from some. This is a town where no one feels afraid to be pulled over by the police or to take a walk in their own neighborhood. This is a town that presents a united front against acts of hate and bias. This is a town whose leaders include residents of color so that when problems are brought forth, there are many perspectives involved in problem solving. I found that to be very, very rich. What is your reaction to that description of the new Needham, if you will?
Snaps. Yeah.
Yeah, really good, really good. Okay. So that is a high level overview of the some sample responses from the survey. 7 people responded to the survey, so I know it does not include everyone's voice. It's still open, wink, wink. So you can take 20 or so minutes so that we have your voice, because I'll be using that as a basis for the vision when we start tweaking and wordsmithing, et cetera. Because I think someone said, I don't know if it was earlier on this call or maybe it was another meeting, that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, it was a different meeting, one of your earlier meetings. And I think that that is absolutely true. So I want to talk a little bit now about your appetite around terms and concepts. I thought of this list and wanted to get your reaction with regard to whether or not you feel it's appropriate, if we were going to play a sentence game, which we're not, would this be the right set of words? Is there any that you would take off the list? Are there any that you would add to the list?
Well, the only positive word here is inclusive. Pretty much diversity, I guess, is a neutral word, and race is probably a neutral word, but racism and racial equity, yeah. I would add more positive words like unity, like harmony, a sense of oneness, to balance the negatives here a bit more.
Thank you. Others?
Yeah,
Lisa, what's the context for the language that you're talking about?
So the context is the vision statement and the guiding principles.
Yeah, so I agree with, I mean, like, it should be more positive. I definitely don't like the white supremacy in there. Like racial bias, I would think, or implicit racial bias would be a good one to be in there. Anti-racist, I think, is actually a positive one, positive and negative, depends on who you are. But I fear you'll get people shut out. The people who need to hear it most will be shut out when you have so many negative words.
Mm-hmm. And these are options. This isn't a set, right?
Yeah. No.
Lisa, one thing that I think we should talk about is behavior, because I think in certain instances, people may not know that their behavior is offensive, or some of the things that they do isn't offensive when it may be offensive to some and not to others. So I don't know how you want to incorporate that into this.
I've noted it. And again, it will maybe be suitable for the vision itself or the guiding principles. I'm thinking the guiding principles off the top of my head.
Okay.
Lisa, I'm also concerned about being mindful about using language that can constitute labels as opposed to action words that you might want in a vision statement,
Mhm.
action concepts that you would want in guiding principles.
Other thoughts? This was just to get you to react, so this is great. Every community has a different appetite for the language that's used, right? And I'm not a Needham resident, so I can guess, but I want to hear it directly from you. So what might be some of those words more positive? I have unity, harmony, oneness, attention to behavior, and on the not so positive side, implicit bias.
Well, I think a lot of today's discussions, you hear the term belonging. I mean, you hear that almost as though it's evolved as a new fundamental core principle along with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Belonging is a new, a phrase that tends to be used a little bit more. And I think to the extent that you're talking about a vision statement of what Needham should look like or wants to look like or aspires to look like, those are the phrases that I think are important to think about, the words.
Community is in the same vein. Belonging and community.
Mhm. And do you think, and I don't want to derail this conversation, do you think belonging will stand the test of time? And I could ask that question about several terms.
Stand the test in time in what way?
So if we're talking about a vision statement that maybe takes us 30 years out, because I'm just thinking about how language changes. I agree with you that it should be included, but I'm just trying to get the group to weigh in on their thoughts on the staying power.
I mean, I think it will stand the test of time. I mean, it's how, if we think about identity and the process of developing self-awareness about an identity, the sense of belonging is part of that framework. It's part of our frame of reference.
Mhm.
It can be very determinative about where we see ourselves in our orbits.
Mhm.
So yes, I do. And, that sense of belonging, I mean, I think to Ramin's point, we are talking about a sense of belonging in a community. And what does community mean?
But on the flip side, I think you have to be careful that belonging in some respects can mean that you have to conform to the majority. So, in that instance, it may be taken into a different context.
Correct. I mean, the idea of belonging does not, along the lines of being inclusive, not exclusionary. Belonging without being limiting, and imposing individual opinions on others.
Welcoming instead of belonging, because that's not really conforming. That's just embracing and accepting everybody. And
Marcus, we can't hear you.
I said, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know why. It must be my connection. I said, what about welcoming instead of belonging, or something that could stand a little bit longer, because we're not asking people to conform as we're welcoming them in. We're taking them as they are and want to continue to do that. And I feel like the fact that we are welcoming people to our community that is now a part of their, in a different light. So maybe that could be another word.
Okay. Duly noted. Anything else on language before we move on?
So I was just going to add that I agree that white supremacy is a strong word for a number of people to hear, but I think there needs to be a recognition of privilege. So I have something about privilege is sort of whirling around for me.
Okay.
Maybe it's entitlement.
Entitlement and superiority, maybe. Of the majority, really.
Yes.
So are those concepts for a vision statement or concepts for guiding principles? And along those veins, I'd add positionality.
Mm. Okay. Any others? Thank you. Okay, so we'll obviously come back to language. I just wanted to do a brainstorm to lengthen the list. So thank you for that. So I did a little search, and here we have some vision statements from towns, cities, and one state. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. What do you think of the first one? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Extremely basic.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a little, I don't know, off-putting if that's all that they're seeking or trying.
Right. What about Ashland?
Yeah, I just don't like the fact that they start with "will be a prosperous." I mean, like, okay, great. I don't know. It's off-putting that that's the first, first intent.
Yeah, yeah.
You mean you don't want to tout the fact that Needham has a AAA bond rating? Just kidding.
What about the city of Minneapolis?
By far much better. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just by far much better
Mhm.
as a vision for what they want their town to be
Mhm.
or their city to be.
And one of the few examples that actually mentions race that I found.
So Lisa, that was my question. So when we start talking about this vision statement, are we going to get specific in terms of areas of focus, or are you trying to keep us in a broad sense of overall awareness? Because if we get, one of the reasons why I liked number one, even though it may not necessarily be inclusive, is that it at least focuses on an item to which you want to address. So as an example, if we talk about our visioning, focusing on policing, housing, schooling, and things of that nature, to me, it's a little bit more tangible. I'm not sure if you want to get to that point at this moment, but I struggle with being too broad versus getting to an objective.
Yes, thank you. And we will get to it, not in this moment. So I'd like to add something to the agreement, which is trust the process.
I don't want to rush you along, so I'll be patient.
Okay. So this was interesting. This is town hall.
I have a quick question, a general question, Lisa, and this may be for Mary Ann and Kate. We are talking about a vision statement for the town of Needham. And I think from a process standpoint, are we looking towards a goal of developing a vision statement that's going to guide the work of this working group, URE? Or are we looking towards adopting a vision statement that we recommend for town-wide adoption?
Town-wide adoption, Vivian.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a vision statement that currently exists that we can review, or is this the first vision statement that we have?
My understanding is that it will be the first, but that's a question for Kate and Katie for sure, historically.
So there isn't a townwide vision statement, and this vision statement was intended for a vision for racial equity. But I think that the conversation might lead to a larger vision as well, but this particular exercise was a vision for racial equity.
Thank you. Any comments on the town hall example?
There's something kind of off-putting about it. I don't know, it seems to me, even though I agree with parts of it, it sounds almost confrontational a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't feel that it really comes across to me as a vision for the future. So in that sense, I sort of agree with Natasha about the confrontationalness. I don't have a sense of how they think about success for the future, which I feel like we got a little bit more of in the Minneapolis statement, certainly than we get here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more of a compliance statement more than anything else.
Compliance.
Yeah.
I would have stopped, had represented, full stop.
You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts on that one? Okay, this is one I found from a state. Reactions?
Which state? If it were Alabama or Mississippi, I would have thought this is fantastic. But which state?
The name has been redacted to protect the innocent.
It's secret mission statement for that state.
I think what I do like about each of these statements is that they both take some ownership in naming the problem that exists now and making an intentional statement to work differently from the way it has been. So I think that that's something that was not necessarily in the other statements in terms of talking about it being historically a predominantly white-led organization or repairing the harm caused by white supremacy and racial inequities. I think at least it names what it is that we're trying to fix with this vision statement.
And we have to keep in mind that the vision is what we want to be, right? So,
So it's aspirational,
implicit.
Right? Sorry, Lisa. It's aspirational is what we want it to be. So, right, I would feel very uncomfortable. I understand what Jen just said, but I don't think that this should be in the vision statement. I think the vision statement is more aspirational. And I think I would not want the Needham vision statement to have white supremacy anywhere near it. For me, right? I mean, I don't know if that's how everyone else feels. I feel like.
And I think from the previous conversation, white supremacy may fall off of our vocabulary list or our term list. Any other reactions to this last one?
I think this last statement goes more towards being, as Jen mentioned, really naming it, naming an issue, naming a problem, and not necessarily looking through the lens of possible solutions or where we want to be.
Okay.
I kind of feel though that again, and I'm not married to the idea of putting white supremacy in a visioning statement, because I think it does certainly have very emotional effects on people. But I think that to me, a vision statement that doesn't own kind of why we're coming up with a vision statement is not as genuine. I think that otherwise it just, to me, looks like, flowery language that everybody should agree, yay, diversity. Like, I think it's more than that. And I think that we have an opportunity to acknowledge why we're at the table doing this right now. And those might not be the words that we want to use, or maybe that is, I don't know. Again, maybe that's not the language we want to use, but I think that we have an opportunity here to really meaningfully identify why we're doing this right now. Probably 20 years ago, we could have been having, it might not have been the same conversation. So there's a reason that we're here doing this right now. And I think that a statement would have a lot more power if we acknowledge that in acknowledging it and talking about what we want to do in the future.
If really the vision is supposed to be based on, and not sort of just a town vision, but based on racism, I mean, I kind of feel like these statements, you can take pieces of them and you can make a pretty good statement, you know? Yeah, it's too much. I definitely think it would white supremacy, but like say, Needham strives to be an inviting place where everyone feels welcome and represented. We realize as a town that's predominantly white, we'd like to become a town free of structural racism, actively engaged in eliminating institutional racism. Something like, I think if it's supposed to be race-based, then, you know, when we were talking before, I was thinking we're now making sort of a vision for the town, but if it really is supposed to be a vision for how town is addressing racism, then I think a lot of this language in here is good, but you just have to make it appropriate for us.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. So your turn to write. We're going to do two things. And this is based on two different models for vision statements. The first is a shorter model, and the second is a longer model. So what I'd like you to do first is to write a one sentence, and you can use all the punctuation you need, semicolon, comma, vision statement for Needham. Now I'm going to show you something that is pretty benign just to get the ball rolling. Now you've seen some things that you like, you've seen some things that you don't like. If you were confined to one sentence or so. So standing, take the 3,000 foot view, 20 years out, that's an arbitrary number of years. And there's no chat function, so I'm going to have each of you read yours out loud so that we have the recording.
Do you want us to draft a one sentence based on what you've proposed here?
Yes. Well, I'm not proposing this. This is just a sample.
Okay.
Like I said, this is pretty benign. This doesn't say a whole lot of anything. But this does belong to a town. It's not Needham. This belongs to a different town. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Okay, I'm ready. Just get it over with.
Give folks one more minute.
Huh?
Let's give folks one more minute.
I don't like writing.
Okay, are you volunteering to go first?
Yeah, sure, I'll go first because I don't like mine. All right, so I said the community of Needham strives to be a beacon in Massachusetts, a town that welcomes diversity and seeks to end the harms caused by systemic racism and racial bias.
That was awesome.
Are you volunteering, Sue, to go next?
Definitely not. I am nowhere near ready.
Okay.
I can read mine.
Okay.
Needham is a town which recognizes unity and diversity as the strongest foundations for a successful, prosperous, or, these are, I have to think through it, and happy community as the starting line.
Thank you.
I'll go next. I like the beginning part of this where it says Needham will be recognized as one of the best towns in Mass for families and businesses, because I'm more on the business side, with a unique quality of life that values people and their diverse backgrounds. We stand for equality, acceptance, and respect.
I had something similar, but not as articulate. I have Needham is recognized as one of the best towns in Massachusetts for families and businesses because it is a diverse, inclusive, and equitable community. I'm thinking of branding, like.
Thank you.
I also like the beginning of this one. So I had Needham will be recognized as one of the best towns in Massachusetts, a place where all citizens and guests are welcomed and participate fully in a vibrant civic, cultural, and business community.
Anyone else ready?
These are really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I have something very rough. Needham strives to be a welcoming and inclusive town that embraces individuals, families, groups, and businesses with diverse experiences, to be a community that is full of vibrant life and is socially and fiscally responsible and accountable to one another.
Dennis, are you working on yours?
Maybe we lost Dennis.
How about you, Marcus?
I'm working. This is a rough draft.
That's all right.
I said Needham welcomes all peoples to join them in a town that believes in racial equity, unity, and I had something that I was going to put, but I didn't finish it. That's where I was headed. I wasn't sure. I was getting there.
We will get there together. All right, Sue, it's back around to you.
Already? Okay.
Yeah, because Jen was avoiding eye contact.
Okay. It's just a kind of a mess and nowhere near as good as some of the other ones I've heard. And I really love what I've heard. So I just have the town of Needham welcomes all people who welcomes all people. I'm sorry, it's just really messy writing here. The town of Needham welcomes all people who each feel they are a valued member of a diverse community built on racial equity and mutual respect.
Okay, drum roll. Jen, you're up.
This is the worst possible assignment for me. I could wordsmith something to death, basically. Okay, Needham is a town that seeks to uplift all who live and work here by continually striving to overcome existing barriers and systems that stand in the way of happiness and health of all.
Thank you. All right, Dennis, are you there? Okay, no Dennis. So I started here because there are very different formats that we might use, and we don't need to think about tonight which format we want. So this is a one sentence format that may be sandwiched between a mission, a list of core values, a strategic plan, etc. But since we're talking particularly about racial equity and it's out of context, I wanted to offer up a different way, which goes to Jay's point earlier about how we might format a vision statement. So you keep your pen in your hand, or if you're typing, here's an alternative way to think about this. So it doesn't really matter what these bullets say, but this is an example from a different town in Texas, I think it was. Oh, I said I wasn't going to name any states. I'm trying to be non-political.
It kind of looks like Texas, though. I'm just saying.
So each of you has been assigned a category, and that'll be coming up on the next screen. And you are going to write the bullet based on your category that would follow this opening sentence: the town of Needham will continue to be one of the best towns in America. Okay. So you are assigned to the category next to your initials. However, we're missing a couple of folks. And I would ask, well, I don't know, if Dennis, if you're there, if you could take Matt's, which was cultural. If not, if someone wants to switch out their assignment for cultural. So you're going to talk about this with a racial equity lens. If we had a vision statement that had one overarching statement, what would the bullets, how would the bullets read?
Sorry, could you explain that again? So these words, these concepts, we should incorporate them in something to do with race?
Yes, so these come from your list of priorities that came out of the survey, areas to pay attention to. And so my deduction is that might be a place where we identify particular bullets that we want in a vision statement, if we go with that format. Otherwise, it could also be included in guiding principles.
I see. I think I see.
Could you go back to the previous slide?
Yes. If you're done and want to do a second one, governance is up for grabs, as well as cultural. Okay, anyone want to start us off? Or should I say, will someone start us off?
I had town hall. And this is what came to mind. I'm not sure if this is right or wrong, and I'm going
There's
first.
no
So
right or
I said town hall and all elected and appointed town governance committees are represented by diverse members of our community, as Needham recognizes that the strength of our community are its people. I don't, it's probably a run-on sentence, but I was trying to.
As we have time for that later, the wordsmithing and grammar.
I can go, Lisa.
Great.
So I have businesses. My thought is our town welcomes diverse businesses and employees who contribute and thrive in a vibrant community alongside institutions that support racial equity.
All right, I could go.
Okay.
I had employment, and I said, we pride ourselves as a town with equal employment opportunities to people of all races and genders. And then I took a quick stab at cultural, and I said, here in Needham, we pride ourselves in our rich and diverse culture, which we celebrate through numerous celebrations throughout the year.
Thank you.
I had education, and I wrote, we, or our school system, educate our children to see themselves as members of one human family, the racial and ethnic diversity of which will enhance or enhances their life experiences and make them better citizens of any community in which they live.
Thank you.
I had social. I had Nikki's words from yesterday about leading with love ringing in my ears still. So I said a welcoming place where all citizens and businesses are seen, encouraged, treated with respect, and loved for what they bring to our shared community.
Thank you.
I'll go next. I'm still working on it, but I had community. Needham is a community that is defined as residents, businesses, and organizations that are united to support us all. And I did a bullet point format. So the next one I said is people are equal, independent of race, religion, and sexual orientation. The next one is respect is given and felt by all. And the last one I just put as something general, acts of kindness are encouraged.
Thank you.
I had law enforcement, and I'm still working on it as well, but I said law enforcement will work with the town to ensure principles and practices in place are created and upheld to protect all. And then what I said is for bullet points, including a community volunteer board that helps, what was I saying? Sorry. So ensuring that, law enforcement reaching out to town community volunteers to help with insight on certain cases and different perspectives, ensuring independent investigations mattering, ensuring that we have independent investigations that that would look into the matters involving police officers. And then I was working on one more. That sounded like a lot of ramble jamble, but but yeah, that was a big one to tackle, and I was trying not to get it wrong, but there's just a lot that goes into that.
Yes, there is.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot. I'm sorry.
The language actually from policing to law enforcement. So I don't know if that was helpful or made it worse. Thank you. Jan?
Yes, so I had housing. We will preserve the existing green space, bustling town center, neighborhood schools, and tree-lined streets while actively tackling historical barriers to moving to town, creating pathways for new neighbors to buy and rent homes in Needham.
Thank you. Who hasn't gone? Vivian?
Unmute. I had economic. We recognize the responsibility for economic health and stability. We promote growth in our planning and development for a community which embraces the diverse needs and interests of all neighbors and businesses.
Thank you. Was that everyone? Okay. So here's a question for you. Do you feel like all of these are important to have a mention?
Are you talking about the vision statement or in that additional?
The additional bullets that follow, if we go with that format.
I think so.
What was the town hall version or perspective again? I think I missed that one.
I wrote town hall and all elected and appointed town governance committees are represented by diverse members of our community, as Needham recognizes that the strength of our community are its people. Not sure if that's the right thing to say, but
if it isn't, that sounds really good.
that's what came out. That's okay.
I don't know if there's a difference with the vision and the mission statement. Like, I feel like the vision statement should be a one line, like short. people have such a short attention span. You know, I'm a pediatrician, so I need to get something in a, so I think in adults are the same, in a quick bullet. And then I feel like the mission statement should be the bullet, sort of more like flush it out a little bit more. But I just feel like people won't read all that. You know, they'll get to the first two lines and be like, okay, I get the point, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you, Toy, and I actually love vision statements that like everybody knows by heart. Because we want them to take it to heart. That's part of where we want to go with this, I think. So it really does become part of the fabric of what guides all our work. So I support that.
Other thoughts?
I agree as well.
I think there are a lot of points to tackle, but I think there is a lot of overlap. So to the extent that we can condense it down and really hit some of the key ones and using the right words that are more positive, I think it's useful.
Okay. Any other opinions? Okay, so take a look at this list. And if we're going to have a couple of sentences to Marianne's point that people will have memorized, is there anything here? Is there anything here that you think should be a bullet that follows it?
Can we take a quick step back for a second? Because I'm still thinking about law enforcement, and I'm wondering why you chose to choose that word versus policing.
So it's not that I chose to, I made the list and then went back and looked at the priorities. So there's no strategy behind it at all. I can change it. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, only because I think if we're trying to focus in or hone in on specific areas and things that are so focused around that, you know, I really feel that there are probably 3 or 4 key themes that we can lean out in terms of where we want to go for the vision. And some of those other items, or most of those other items, will fall underneath that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So law enforcement go ahead.
Also, Jay, my thinking too was to be more inclusive of the various stages. So I saw policing sort of as just what involves the police, as opposed to a broader set of things. But we would go back and match it to the survey because that's already information that's been collected.
Okay.
Lisa, I just want to clarify. I mean, we've been talking about a mission statement and we've been talking about a vision statement. And I think it's important, given the task that we've been given, to talk about each of these subjects. And so, while I think that a vision statement and a mission statement, I think both need to be short, I don't necessarily think it means that we exclude language that is a follow-up by way of establishing the goals that we are talking about in each of these areas. So I'm not sure where we go with that.
Well, I'm hearing short, but I'm also hearing needs to point to particular areas. So I think that,
and what I'm saying is that we live in such a soundbite society that while I think it's very important for people to embrace something and for us to be straightforward and simple in our intention, you know, to Marianne's point, that it's something that people will hold on to and remember.
mm-hmm.
I don't want us to be in a position where the mission statement and the vision statement are given short shrift for the purposes of being able to have a soundbite or a tagline or a slogan.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they need to be intentional.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, Vivian, I do agree with that. I'm hoping that the vision statement can in some ways function as an umbrella. And but it's the piece that people carry and everybody knows,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't think that eliminates some other set of points that are more explications of, you know, or deeper dive into some of these areas that we see as so critical. but I don't see that as the by heart part necessarily. So I guess that's what I'm thinking about.
Mhm. So here's an analogy. You look at a menu at a restaurant. Let's take French press, just because Jay's here. Right? You see a description for a buttermilk chicken sandwich. And then you read the description, right? So it gives you a more fulsome idea of what we're talking about. And so that's what I'm saying. I say the mission statement, the vision statement, yes, in very simple, straightforward terms so that some people will get it immediately. It'll be highlighted, it'll be understood, but then you give some greater context. And I think that's what's important for all of these categories.
Vivian, you're making us very hungry.
Jay does that to me. I'm thinking I got to put a calendar reminder on Thursday.
Okay.
But Lisa, when we move forward, we can talk about goals within each one of these categories, right? I mean, we can, to Marianne's original point, we can summarize, and then within each one of these groups, we can, of course, vision, mission statement, goals. If you kind of break it out like that, so that we don't lose sight of these categories.
Yes, and there are many. So I'm definitely keeping a parking lot because some of this conversation will inform guiding principles and recommendations. So we don't have to throw away anything. And I think what I'll bring back, well, before I bring it back, what I'll send you electronically is what it would look like together and what it would look like separate. So you can always have, in this world of electronics, you can have all the links you want. And so there could be the aspirational piece and then a little bit about for each category. It's your mission statement. It's not for me to decide. So it's not like I'm avoiding or evading the question. I think once I turn it back around and give you something to react to, then we can obviously continue the conversation. I can also send you some links to other examples. And, it ranges. There are some statements, which I showed you, that were 1 or 2 sentences. And then there are some that have 9 focus areas. I saw one even up to 14 focus areas. Now, we ended up with 12 focus areas because there are 12 people on the committee. So that was sort of an arbitrary number, which is why I asked if there are things that how you would prioritize this list. And it could be once you guys refine your statements and send them to me, that we'll have a better gauge as to which ones rise to the top for us. So I hope you didn't hit delete when you were typing. And for those of you who hand wrote them, do it sooner rather than later, because if you're like me, you can't read your own handwriting 2 days later. So.
Lisa, let me also, if I may, ask a question, and
Yes.
maybe this is for Marianne and Kate and Katie. We're talking about these aspirational goals. It seems to me that it's not within our purview to talk about how the work is going to get done. I mean, it seems to me in each of these categories, there are existing organizations in towns or committees in towns or boards in towns which are already doing some of this work. And what we're doing is giving them the racial equity lens, under which to do it. Mm-hmm. And so again, to the point of not reinventing the wheel, it seems that, for example, when we're talking about economic development, if that's something we pitch back to FinCom or to the economic development director or, whomever is responsible for the day-to-day execution of our town's plans.
So I will defer to Kate and Katie, but my first reaction, Vivian, is that you all are giving everyone sort of what it would feel like if their work is impactful. And so what they continue to do, stop doing in order to get there, like you said, I agree, would be up to them. If that makes sense.
I agree with that, because I think building on what Vivian said about, something that takes each of these aspects of work and thinks about it through a racial equity lens, right? It's creating an aspiration almost in each of these areas in a way that we haven't done that, with the exception of education, where some work has already been done in the Real Coalition. But these other areas, nobody has ever thought about it, I really think, from that perspective in terms of what are our aspirations there, and tried to, you know, pull it out and define it, to put something out there to guide that work.
I
So
also think, especially coming from the schools, that it is really beneficial to the town to have a unifying message about what this means, so that as we're all working on different aspects of it, we're really headed in the same direction. So I think there's something really important about having that.
So Marianne, how do you see this ending? What would be the final product of this? I'm a bit confused now. I mean, we do this exercise, which sounds very interesting and is productive, but what's the end? What is the end point? So a vision is developed. Is that what's going to be adopted by the select board, or is it something that's going to be recommended to town? I mean, how is this going to work out?
So I would see it as something that would be ultimately adopted by the select board. And I also see, as we're able to talk about this in some of these other areas, that it becomes something that, again, starts to guide some of that work for those groups, so that we ensure that a racial lens is part of the consideration explicitly as they're thinking about goal setting over the next 10 to 20 years. And I don't think that's been a lens that we've intentionally brought to our work as a community before. So we're trying to make that work intentional across all of these areas for Needham.
I mean, could I give just an example of how that might play out? I mean, if we're talking about having the kind of equity, appreciation of diversity, welcoming, opening doors, creating opportunity, I mean, it seems to me that if we establish those as goals, recognizing it's under the umbrella of a mission and value statement, you know, that we would then pass it through select board, pass it through Kate, through the town manager's office, and say, okay, these are the aspirations we have. These are the goals that we see, so that we can have consistency in perspective, that the town adopts this town-wide. So for example, we want more diversity in town hall. We want more diversity on our town boards. We want more diversity within town meeting. You know, go out there and figure out how you're going to show people how to become a town meeting member, and the resources that they have there, and what they need to be thinking about doing, and how they can contribute. And, you know, what would a diverse town meeting membership look like?
And we could collectively think about how that might change how we think about some of the decisions that get made as well. I do think new perspectives will bring a new look at some of those decisions. I'm going to trust the process at the moment.
Okay. So we talked about prioritizing. I am cognizant of the time as well. So I want to talk a little bit about next steps. As you know, we're under time pressure. And so we want to do some work in between. That's the royal we, collective we. So I do want those two statements that you crafted tonight. I will send you some additional links. I will also send you at a certain point after that some drafts in different formats for you to react to. If you like have an epiphany between now and the next time we see each other, feel free to reach out to me directly. And I can answer a question or receive additional information. If you have not completed the survey, it would be great if you did that. There's a lot of richness in there. I'll be pulling out some of that now that I have recommendations around language and appetite for terms. And then the fun part, which is wordsmithing, happens, which is even harder on a Zoom call than in person. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Lisa, I just want to be sure you would actually like each person here to email you both of the statements that they wrote. Would that be
Yes.
easiest for you to actually have the real words? Because
Yes.
I know you're looking at pulling from all the words that we kind of put out there. Okay.
And I'll make the changes to the slide deck with the additions around the terms as well. I don't know if, is there a transcript of this available as opposed to the video?
There's not a transcript. So there is just video. Well, actually, Kate, there is in Zoom some transcription service. I don't know if we've figured out how to activate that. And I don't know if you can do it after the fact.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Lisa, are there particular pieces that, I mean, we will have somebody take minutes. We are taking minutes. Is there any particular piece you want us to just go through and write down, or?
Well, we can talk about it tomorrow.
Perfect.
Yep. So how was the experience?
I think it's very nice exercise. I'm still at the loss in terms of the mission of Nuari itself.
That's beyond me, Rami.
I think it would be helpful to try to, because frankly, when we talked about missioning and all that, I thought we were going to be doing this for Nuari, and somebody asked the question, is this for us or is this for the town? I think the town needs one, and it's a good exercise, and I'm very happy to be participating in it, of course. But I'd like to know what is our mission, because this is, even though there are many committees and groups in town, this is a very unique group in the sense of the diversity of people who are here, in terms of the organizations in town, in terms of the ethnic diversity that we have. So I don't want this to go to waste in terms of us, just wondering for other things rather than just focusing on things that we can achieve and do.
You want me to take that one, Marianne?
Well, you could start. I have thoughts too.
I'm just going to repeat the 5 bullets that the select board asked the committee to do. And the very first thing was to articulate a vision for racial equity in Needham, to help the board adopt that kind of vision. And so you're doing the work to help to recommend to the board to adopt it. And then the committee was asked to establish protocols and practices for getting community feedback, for setting up communication structures, and to go through the recommendations that have been made to the board, which you in your work have really synthesized into several major categories, and making those recommendations to the board as to what they should start on. And I think a lot of what you did tonight really could inform that, because I do think, as many of you said, the making recommendations on those areas through a racial lens is going to be a way that we can pick that up. And if the recommendation, as Vivian said, is to increase the number of elected and appointed board members proportional to the community, then we can come up with ways to do that. But the recommendations on what should be done first is what I believe the board is asking. Marianne, have I got it anywhere close?
No, I think that's totally close. And I would have said, we don't have Matt here tonight, so I hesitate to speak for the board because we haven't had an explicit conversation, but we all did agree that these were the elements that should be important in the Nuari charge. So I do think that this group the reason this group was organized was to make a difference in Needham with where we are with racial equity, and set some priorities and make some achievable goals in those areas that are most critical to what the group identifies.
Thank you.
Any other reactions?
I just want to say, I think the other observation I would make is that folks who are here in this group, I feel so fortunate because I know that everybody is so committed to making a difference in this, that I trust that this group is going to hold us accountable to actually making a difference. Okay. So in that sense, this is a process too that I'm still working through. We are going to make a difference.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for that. But I just have a quick question. So is Lisa working with us through the vision statement or through, what is the kind of the process and her involvement?
So in this engagement, Lisa is working with us through the vision statement. I think we're going to have to figure out, are there ways in which Lisa could be helpful going forward? But we've asked Lisa to work with us through this first step right now. And I want to thank her for getting us through tonight, because this is a challenge, and this was her first night with the group, although she did watch last week just to get a little bit of a sense of this group. And, you know, it's a challenging topic to walk into.
Well, thank you all for your participation and trusting the process. I will be in touch electronically so that we can keep the process going between now and the December meeting, because that's all we have.
And well, because we're all anxious to get to real work. So, you know, this is a group that is mission oriented and does want to get there. But I'm going to say, if there's anybody else here who wasn't able to complete the first survey, please do take the time to go in and do that. Because I know that Lisa is looking for all the different threads from everybody as we're looking at pulling those together. Other thoughts for tonight?
Yeah, I just
Otherwise,
have one
I
quick
think,
question.
yes.
I think going on that piece of, you know, you expect, or you know that we're a group that's going to hold, you know, this accountable in the work that we're going to come up with, and, you know, hold the select board. And I think what's important in that, and when you say that, is that if we are giving recommendations and we're doing things and we bring it to the select board, and you decide to do something or not do something, are you going to come back to us? Or we are part of that process, and, you know, this is where you are, this is what we figured out, and maybe we feel like that's not the best reason and why. And if there's any kind of like back and forth between us, what is the ultimate deciding factor just what the select board says is going to go, even if we may not agree? Or are we going to kind of work collaboratively with that? I just don't know that process or what that would look like, since this is, you know, a new group to all of us. But I think you put us together for a reason, and I hope that's a big part of it when it comes down to make real decisions and things that are going to change the town in a positive way.
So I don't think, so I do think it's a collaborative process, right? Because part of it is the select board is going to want to understand what the recommendations are, to think about, you know, certainly recommendations that have budgetary impacts have to fit within a whole budget. So there's considerations there. Recommendations that are non-budgetary are in a different, where we have to think about what human capital resources might be required to make something happen. So I think that there will be discussions with the select board as these recommendations come forward about what's achievable in what kind of time frame. All right. Because it could be that there are short, medium, and long things that come out of the work that we're doing. I do hope there's some near-term things, and there will definitely be longer-term things. So, you know, none of it it's not an easy answer, and not everything will happen immediately. That much I can promise. But we will figure out what are the things that can happen sooner rather than later, and what's the roadmap to get somewhere else.
Thank you.
Does that seem fair? Other questions? All right, then I am grateful to everybody for your voices tonight. So thank you for that. And we do have to officially adjourn, which means I need somebody to make a motion and a second to adjourn, and then I'll have to call the roll.
Motion.
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
And a second?
Yes. Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? I know everybody's hungry from all the discussion so far. So Sue,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Ramin,
Yes.
Vivian,
Yes.
Natasha,
Yes.
and Toyin.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. We are adjourned. So we will see everybody. Actually, I'm not looking at the date. I guess it is the first Monday in December, which looks like it's the 7th is our next meeting. So between now and then, I know we'll all be doing some wordsmithing with Lisa and providing some more feedback there. And I look forward to getting us all back together then. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Same to you. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.